So our speaker tonight is Nancy Hodgkinson. She's sitting right here, and she's going to talk to us about deja vu all over again.
Okay, that's it.
And my wife says that's it. I'm not supposed to say any more. So anyway, I'm going to let her take it from here. Come on up here, Nancy.
I think she just brought you. What did I brought? Oh, I hit something.
Oh,
That's
all right. Here,
right.
with this down.
Yeah, thank you.
There you go.
There's more.
All right.
I got most of it, but
We're doing a little housekeeping here. Well, as Tom said, my name is Nancy Hodgkinson, and I've got a question for you. How many of you have a bug-out bag at home?
kind of sort of,
Thank you.
a little bit.
2 of you.
What is a bug-out?
Well, that's what I'm going to tell you what a bug-out bag is all about.
I want one. What color are those bags?
It's any color you want it to be. A long time ago, last August, I was on a train leaving from New York and going to Canada. I really wanted to see the Canadian countryside. It's beautiful. And I was relaxed, plenty of leg room. It was great. And then all of a sudden I noticed that the train was slowing down. We were almost to Canada. I couldn't figure out why. And it was going, And then all of a sudden, in the middle of absolutely nowhere, this train stopped. And it was an Amtrak, so they don't do that. And I did see out of the corner of my eye a red building. And then I looked a little more around, and I saw a whole lot of people in the army. They were all wearing fatigues. They were Canadians. They were attached to the customs. And they all had holsters. I don't know if they had a gun in the holster, they just had the holster. But I just wasn't thrilled at all. I was terrified. We all were. And then they boarded the train. And I was sitting in the back of the car, so I was the first person he got in that car. And he said, I need all of your information, your passport, you filled out a form, customs form, I need that. I need your itinerary for your trip, and I need to know when you're leaving. Nothing like making me feel welcome in Canada. But he needed to know exactly when I was going. And I had fortunately a ticket to go back home. So he said, good, all right, fine. And then he said, what brings you to Canada? And I said, well, honestly, it's the jazz. I love jazz. And Canada and Montreal are famous for their jazz. And that's why I'm going. That and scenery, and I want to go to Quebec. I speak French. I want to scare somebody to death with my French. I just want to see Canada. And he said, okay. And he said, okay. Let me see your purse. And I showed him my purse. He said, now I'd like to see what your carry-on looks like. And he opened up the carry-on. And I don't have it with me. In my carry-on was my teddy bear. He said, aren't you a little bit old for a teddy bear? I said, well, the teddy bear is the same age I am. And we've been together. He said, forever? And I said, yeah, from the beginning. He became very important in my life when I was put into a bomb shelter with other children in Brooklyn, New York during World War II. And a bomb shelter is not a shelter that they have in schools here in Dallas. A bomb shelter in Brooklyn, New York was equivalent to a bomb shelter anywhere. You sat on a rug or you sat on a towel. There was very little light. And it was rather frightening. And for a 5-year-old, it was terrifying. And my father knew what was coming. So he prepared me for the experience of going into a real fallout shelter or a real bomb shelter. And the way he did it was rather cute. He got a pillowcase. And he held it out and he said, I put a candy bar in here for you. And I was like, oh, okay. I knew it couldn't be bad, whatever it was we were doing. And he said, where's Teddy, your teddy bear? And I said, I'll go get him. And he said, okay, good. Put him in. And I did. And he said, your night-night, where's that? And I said, it's on my bed. No, put it in. He said, do you have a flashlight? And I said, I think so, but it doesn't have batteries. I'll get batteries for it. Do you have a Band-Aid box? No? Okay, well, I'll give you a Band-Aid box, but I won't give you any Band-Aids, because you're gonna have to go through wound care training, before I give you any real Band-Aids, because you're gonna start putting on everything. And he's right, 5-year-old will do just that with Band-Aids. They become a toy. And what happened with that particular bag is that it became what I was using through almost every experience I had. Somewhere, somehow, my bug out bag and I were together. We went through storms together, hurricanes together. We traveled together a lot. I took him to Europe. He didn't have to have a passport. That was reassuring. But he was never a problem until Canada. I mean, he even wasn't a problem in Canada. But it was the way I could internalize, or I could hold on to my confidence. I could hold on to my courage. I could face anything as long as I had my things with me. So if you understand what I mean by that, most people who have a bug out bag, that's what it is. They've got what's going to keep them safe. And they have it with them. Children should have their own bug out bag. Wives should have their own bug out bag. If just the husband has it, it's not going to work, because if a tornado hits and he's at work and she's at work and the children are at school, they need to all have the same information. In children's bags, you have to put addresses, where contact people, contact names, contact phone numbers, because the children can get separated and it gets rather scary for them. So if they have all of this information, they know they can get a hold of you, they start to relax. And it helps. With ISIS, and ISIS was the reason they got on the train, pure and simple. ISIS had gone to great lengths to upset America in a little way. And so the American government and the Canadian government got together and they said, okay, we've got to stop the movement between America and Canada, because what they were doing is they were coming up from America, going to Canada, and then going to Syria. I mean, that was sort of the line of traffic. And they were doing other things. They were doing a lot of munitions and building of ammunition and so forth in Canada, which they were not doing in America. But the product of the bullets and so forth did come from America. They were transporting the ammunition, but it wasn't being put together quite as well as it was in Canada. They have a lot more freedom, a lot bigger area, a big wilderness, and that's where they were working. So the first thing they did was close down the roads that if you went by car into Canada, you went through the same thing with customs that I went through. If you went on a plane, you went through the same thing I went through. And eventually, and now, they pretty well closed that door. They're going to have to find another way. I'm sure they will find another way. What interested me about ISIS is how similar it was to World War II. Hitler had the brown shirts. Do you ever hear anything about them? Do you know anything about them? Okay. Well, for those of you who don't know what a brown shirt is, it's basically ISIS. They would go around working for Hitler and terrify people. just terrified them. They, for no reason, without provocation, they would attack. And it got everyone in Europe so nervous and so upset that it was very easy for Hitler literally to walk through France to Paris. And the reason I know a little bit about that is because I'm named after a city in France called Nancy, or Nancy. And the reason I know about it even more so is because I was born during that period of time in New York, in Brooklyn. So I heard a lot of stories about the French and how they suffered. But every New Yorker in Brooklyn had a story, because everyone had family over there. Italians, it was just French, English. And we all got along. The funny part about it was, because of World War I, there was a tremendous feeling of, let's not get involved in that war over there in Europe. It's not our fight, it's their fight. And we've already lost so many people, over 100,000 of us, American soldiers, in a fight that wasn't even ours. And they left it that way until the Japanese decided to settle that problem by bombing Pearl Harbor. And suddenly we were at war. But we weren't just at war with Japan, we were at war with everybody. We went over to England primarily because Winston Churchill was begging us to help him. And that experience for us as a country was weird. You know how right now we're on the right, we're on the left, we're Democrats, we're Republicans, we're fractured, totally fractured because of this. Republicans don't vote, Democrats don't vote, Republicans, without an argument. I don't know if you've noticed that or I'm the only one in the room. But the funny thing about Pearl Harbor was we stopped being Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, and we were just plain Americans. And I grew up believing that everybody thought the same way. We were all Americans, we were all on the same side, and we could do just about anything. What depresses me today is that we don't have that. Unfortunately, something is going to have to get us together again, and I wish we could do it in a peaceful way, but it doesn't seem to be historically the way we do things. My father was a military man. He was a major in Fort Hamilton, Brooklyn. And the reason that we had those bomb shelter experiences was because the Germans had U-2 boats up and down the East Coast, and they had a submarine in the city of, in the Hudson, and we were right on the Hudson. And they didn't want to scare anybody, so they just sort of opened up bomb shelters and didn't say anything as to why they were being opened. But they made sure we knew where they were. And can you imagine what the parents were going through, the men were going through with this war? I mean, how hard it was on them because they couldn't protect their children. And that was the thing that bothered my father the most, because he couldn't protect us. He could protect his people, but he couldn't protect us. There was a little boy, JJ, in the sandbox. We had a tremendous sandbox in the apartment complex where we lived. And JJ was sort of the guy that he went to for everything, or I went to for everything. Every question you had, JJ could answer. And so many of the men were missing. So many of the fathers weren't there because they were in different places, different towns, different countries. So my father ended up being sort of the surrogate father for all of the kids in the sandbox. He taught them how to march, how to correctly salute an officer, and he would return the salute correctly. He answered all of their questions, and he answered them honestly. He did not cover it up. Because when children are born in that environment, you don't cover it up. You don't make it nice, because they'll see right through you. My father was very upset over the way I had internalized the war, but all of the children did internalize it. They couldn't help it. One day I was in a line with my parents to go in to have lunch in a restaurant. And there was a woman standing next to me, and I started talking to her. She started talking to me, whomever. And mother and dad were talking over there. And my father said, "What were you two talking about?" I said, "Oh, didn't you see her arm? She was in Auschwitz. Those are tattoos." And I told her I was so glad to hear that, I was so glad to see that she was home and safe in America. And he said, "You know, you've gotten to the point where you're getting too good at this war." And that's when we were moved to New Jersey. Because I was prepared and knowledgeable, and I could read early, so I could read headlines. Which is not funny when the child is 8 and she's reading headlines. I mean, you sort of want to protect a child from headlines, especially during that period of time. And what bothers me today is that I have grandchildren that watch YouTube, and they watch the beheadings in Syria. What is the difference between me reading headlines and my children seeing beheadings? There's no difference. They're children of war, just as, you know, the children of the information, war information. They internalize it. It's not good for them. It's not good for us, and it's not healthy. But we can't do anything about it except answer all their questions as best we can. I just read a book about ISIS, and I was completely flabbergasted about how much information about ISIS I didn't know. Worldwide, there are about 30,000 of them. Almost none of them were left here in America. They all left, and you probably read about the woman who was heading up the organization in America. Did you read about her? Yeah. She headed up the ISIS organization in America. And she was finally tracked down, and they haven't caught her per se, but they put her out of business and her ability to communicate. So there are things going on in this country, but the information is very scattered. And I read this book and realized that the war ISIS is creating, or is undertaking, they've been undertaking forever. I mean, it has a really deep history. And they've been mad at a lot of people for a long time. They're not very large. No government really wants them. I mean, Hitler wanted the brown shirts to do his bidding, to scare people, but he didn't want to give them any authority. They were just sort of hoods. And that's really what ISIS has been turned into. A gang of thieves, or a gang of brutes. They're not going to have anything to say about what happens. And that's going to really be their frustration. I think right now they're probably trying to figure how to get the control of both the money and the power. But they're being locked down on it, according to this book. And it's written by James Aubrey. It came out last month. And if you send me your email, I'll send you the title and the author of that book. I also will send you a list of all of the things that can go into your bag, your bug-out bag. Let me tell you some of the things that I think are cute. All right? Not cute per se, but this is the one that I will just get a big chuckle out of. You know what this is? I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember this.
What's the hand crank?
I have one.
Yeah.
We do too.
Yeah.
We all have one.
I love it. It's sold by the Red Cross. And this LD light turns on after you've done this quite a while. But the thing I love also about it is the port for your cell phone charger is right here. So you don't need to have a flashlight. This is also a radio giving you weather channels and information. And it really works. And it's used a lot. And you can buy it at Fry's, but I recommend, they've marked it up so much. If you contact Red Cross, it's called Eaton. Yeah, E-T-O-N. And it's put out by Red Cross. And I will also send Tom a list of the phone numbers that you can call to get one of these if you wish it. I'm not selling it, but I would recommend seriously, if you do have a bug out bag, this really, it's small, it's compact. And if you have a teenager in your family, this is a perfect gift for Christmas. Runs about $30. Now the other thing is, if you have seniors in your family, seniors in your family are a problem because when a tragedy, or not a tragedy, when a hurricane or a tornado comes in, they really, really get more afraid. They get as afraid as a child would get because they don't know what they're going to do. They don't have a plan. They don't have a bug out bag. And for them, it's frightening because they've got to take their medicine, their glasses, and a spare pair of glasses. They've got to have something like a phone and a light. They've got to have the things that matter to them. And it has to be something they can carry. It can't be something that somebody else has to carry for them. So it has to be fairly light. And it's really, a friend of mine has a mother who really was upset over the tornado because she had once lived in Forney. And so she said, Nancy, could you talk to her and help her put together a bug out bag? And I went, okay, just in case she has another tornado. I hope she doesn't, but all right. So we went through, and once she understood what it was going to be small. It was compact. She couldn't carry all of her clothes with her. She could take her toothbrush and her toothpaste, but not everything else. These are just emergency items. And a big flashlight takes up a lot of room. A little one like this one really works. And you do have to have a cell phone. I have, oddly enough, I have a landline by AT&T, and I have a charger for the landline. And it's a Wi-Fi charger. So if I'm sitting out in the middle of the woods, I get on my landline. If I want to, I can do that. I'm thinking always of ways of navigating through whatever comes. Being a victim isn't really the thing I want to be. And that's where the bug out bag comes. You cease being a victim and you start becoming a little bit stronger internally because you've got your stuff with you. You're not looking for everything. I keep my things in an envelope. All my papers go in an envelope. My passport, my travel papers go into an envelope so that I don't lose them or misplace them. Because you don't want to be looking for those at the last minute. You want to know they're always there. And oddly enough, they're always in my bug out bag. Where else could they be? In a closet, in a drawer. Yeah. So what I want you to do is think about what would go into your bug out bag. If you had one. If you could put one together. Now, I know you in the corner, you've already got one, right?
Well, it's got more in it than that. I mean,
okay, what have you got in yours?
I have several levels of bug out bags. One of them has underwear,
Yeah.
underwear replacement stuff. It's more than you're talking about. But then I thought about Well, suppose we were out for 30 or 60 days, so I bought a cheap crock pot with an extension cord, put it in the second one. So some of this stuff is not what I have, is you can't carry it. I mean, I'm assuming you have to leave town with short notice in an automobile or something. But what you're talking about is a condensed version. And the only thing, the question I have to you is logistically, for anybody who takes medication, if you want to keep a bug out bag at work or school and one at home, so logistically, how do you keep them both supplied with medication?
The medication goes wherever you go. In other words, I had a child that had medication. And my rule about medication is when you go from home to school, the medication goes from home to school. If you
But
have to take-
how much medication?
Oh, you mean, what, oh. I went to a doctor once and I said, if I needed to go, say, away for a month or two, could you give me some form of paperwork that I could take to a pharmacist in, say, Canada or wherever and get my prescriptions filled? And he said, yes. All they'd have to do is contact me, and I would have, on the other side of the sheet, I would have all of the things that could possibly, be an issue to another doctor. I don't have any serious problems at all, but if I did have serious problems, those would be listed on that piece of paper so that the doctor could fill out the prescription if you're out of town and you need to have another month's supply. Now, this happened to me once, and I've forgotten exactly where I was, where I lost my prescription. I lost my pills. And I had to refill it. And so I went through this whole thing of, here's a piece of paper from my doctor, I had absolutely no problem getting it filled because he could call up my doctor and get it prescribed, get the authorization. So but you have to have that paperwork.
Yeah, I also keep cash, or I have cash.
Oh, you
that
have to have
that
cash.
I could put in the bag. It's not in the bag itself, but I can put it in there real quickly.
That's absolutely,
And,
thank
as
you.
well as silver.
Well, silver,
Quarters are heavy, but sometimes you may need them for token coins. But
yeah, but my children, I gave them some silver, well, not silverware, it's plasticware for their bags. And as far as money is concerned, yes. And there's one other thing about that money. Make sure it's in singles. Because what will happen is you'll want something that's very important, and all you have is a $20 bill. They'll sell it to you for $20.
yeah, that's a good
Because
point.
you're desperate. And you have to realize that. So to be not desperate, you have singles.
I carry a little piece of sheet of paper that has my medical contacts and
Right.
medications on one side and my family contacts on the other side. 'Cause
That's
I don't
exactly.
have any family that lives close to Dallas, but it's, this is just
That's
basic
exactly.
information.
Right.
And so they got another look there. The other thing I would think you should have, which would be very controversial in this group, would be a small pistol.
Well,
Oops,
gun.
there we go again.
no, relax,
Have a gun.
relax.
What would you get?
I like bow and arrow. Okay?
How about a sharp pen?
Or
a sharp
or a
pen.
healthy knife. Healthy knife.
That's up to you. If I had a gun in my hand, I'd probably shoot myself in the foot. There's no reason for me to hold on to a gun. I haven't been trained. If I had been trained, I'd hold on to, I'd have a gun. But I'm no interest in a gun whatsoever. So, with me, it's a moot point. It doesn't matter. But if you have a gun and you have it in there and you know how to fire it, also you have to have the license with you at all times.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you have a knife, you have to have some form of,
Well, hunting knives can come in all different kind of sizes.
yeah,
The small ones can be very versatile, but you have to have a piece
Yeah.
of paper for them. I think, contact information for it. You should also keep a copy of an outrage, if your medical insurance,
right.
how do you make a claim, or you can certainly go to a pharmacy, but instead of costing you $500 for 30 days supply, maybe it's only $25 if you got the right insurance card.
Yeah.
Um,
But you're not going to probably get into a pharmaceutical situation in a shelter.
Yeah.
In other words,
I
you
mean,
have to have it with you, and, you know,
You're
you
talking
have
about,
to
you're
carry.
talking about short-term emergencies.
I'm talking
aren't you?
about a very short-term emergency. I'm not talking about a camping out things situation.
You don't need clothes then.
You don't need clothes. Nobody's gonna notice. Let's see, what else? There's, yes, go
I
ahead.
was given something and I just kept it. It's a shampoo that's a dry shampoo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a dry shampoo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is that? Never heard of it, never heard of it.
Yeah, they have.
They sell
I
them
got
the-
it for free. I said, okay.
They sell it at Walgreens.
Dry shampoo.
Like if your people are sick and they can't, you know,
Really?
get to the water, yeah.
But the point is that I want you to start thinking in terms of putting together a bug out bag.
All right.
That's the whole reason I'm here, really, is to get you thinking about it. Thinking, what would I put into that bag?
The news is always saying that Channel 5, they have something in your.
Yeah,
You know,
tuna cans.
You know, like have a, they don't call it a bug out bag, but some kind of a, it's called a, I don't know, whatever, in case you're caught in a bad storm or something, you put enough stuff in a bag.
Yeah, well,
Go to.
a go-to, but the term bug out bag comes, I found that on the internet.
That's interesting.
It's actually been, now it's something you can pull a bug out bag and everything is there. For $170, you too can have one. But if you don't want to do that, you can do it yourself slowly. Yes.
Well, I used to live in California,
You want
it was
it?
earthquake
You want it?
country.
Yeah.
And they always recommend that you
Catfish.
keep in a, if you can't go someplace else,
You want some?
but
Yeah.
the services are off, like
Yeah.
utilities and electricity and stuff, then they recommend that you keep in a plastic
I don't want
garbage
those.
container, you know, a certain list of
I need
things.
some.
And one of them is food, radio, and flashlight and stuff like that. So I think the corollary to what you're talking about is
You don't want
suppose
it
you
with my fork.
can't leave. What would you need to get along? A certain amount of water, a certain amount of food.
You need a gallon of water every
And I
day.
never keep that stuff around.
Well, no, but I mean, usually the shelters will have,
Clear
you know,
shelter.
water for you.
Yeah.
And that brings up the subject of shelters. There are shelters here in Dallas, and I have not been able to get a straight answer from anybody in the Red Cross as to where exactly they're located.
Oh, yeah, the tunnels.
Well, we have the tunnels, but I want them to publish something so that we can hand it out to people and say, these are the shelters in the event of a tornado or whatever, or a hurricane or an earthquake. We've even had earthquakes in Dallas, for Pete's sake. I mean, it isn't as though we're bulletproof. So I'm going to get the Red Cross to do something, and probably, hopefully, in the next week or so. And what we'll do is I'll give the information, I'll send it to Tom. Okay, Tom? And then Tom can give it out to you. Or I'll come next week and, or is it what, next week?
Yeah, you could flyer.
I can bring the flyer next week with all of the information I have printed out for you. But as I said, my computer's down, my printer's down. I'm down, it's awful. It's a terrible feeling.
And there's no crisis.
Yeah, and there's no, I'm having my own internal crisis, I guess you could say. But, any other questions or comments? Yes?
Well, my dad was a major also in the army. He was over, I don't know if your dad did go overseas.
He went over to Japan.
Oh, he went to Japan. But we had, after the war in the 50s, we had a bomb shelter at Edgerton in the basement.
Right.
We lived in Chicago. And we had everything there, you know, food, water, everything.
Well, you know,
Bicycle helmets, you know, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. It's funny because when I was looking at bug out bags,
Mhm.
they had a,
So they'll have to throw it
they had an advertisement for a bomb shelter,
Mhm.
or a shelter, let's just put it that way.
Tornado.
And you could call in and ask, you know, they wanted to sell you the whole thing.
They had those.
And it was sort of like, wow, I guess people are still doing that. They're putting in shelters, like they did up in, you know, Dorothy, and, you know, tornadoes. They had tornado shelters.
We have them. Yeah, we sell them.
Yeah, they do, yes.
Tornado
Wait,
shelters can
wait,
purchase.
He's talking.
Oh.
Hold on, go ahead.
Well, you asked about what you would put in it. There's something that's out there now that I think is really interesting, and I use them. I have a rechargeable battery pack.
Like this one?
Yeah, well, now that, okay, that stores energy and then you can plug your cell phone into it and recharge it, is that right? Yeah.
No, you
exact-
get the charge. The charge comes from the crank. We're
What's that?
actually cranking it.
Oh, okay, but see, what I'm talking about is slightly different. There are two, this is a battery pack that you charge up.
Okay.
And then once it's charged up, depending on what devices you have, you get all different sizes. For $20, you can buy one that will recharge your cell phone 3 or 4 times. And it's about the size of a pack of cigarettes.
Where can you buy one?
You can get them in any cell phone
Right.
store or on Amazon or whatever. Okay. They also have, I also have another one that I use on my bicycle, which is a solar charger. And so what it does is it charges up these batteries, and then they have USB ports on it. So you can, anything that has a USB port on it, you can recharge. Like, for example, the USB flashlight that I have in my pocket.
Okay.
You see, and
He's
so
ready.
and
He's
so and so stuff that allows you to, you know, to store energy and to recharge USB stuff like cell phones and flashlights and so on is a really handy thing these days.
I agree. I agree. Are there any other,
He wants to talk in the corner, but we can like,
what?
Well, I was going to make you take it.
or should.
Oh, good, you were gonna talk, well, he'll pass it to you.
All I wanted to comment was that if you live in a house, you could get tornado shelters either below ground or above ground that meet neighborhood requirements and not that expensive. But they don't have, I don't think they have food supplies in them, because back in the 50s, bomb shelters were very popular. I'm sure you still got a few of them around.
I live in an apartment, and I'm sure we don't have one. It was built in 1950.
How many floors are in your apartment?
2.
If you're ever in a building and a tornado comes through, go to the stairwell or the elevator shaft, because those are solid concrete, and get inside, you'll be perfectly safe.
Well, I was told by the manager, since we don't have the stairwell and we don't have an elevator, and the reason I got into this apartment is I have a stairmaster, unintentionally, but I go up and down a full flight of stairs for exercise. So I am missing a shelter, but I was told that there's something in the building itself, and I haven't pursued it, that they would recommend that I go to if I wanted to, if I was worried about a tornado. You can ask me a question?
Yeah, I'm going to try to pull together an experience and an idea and then ask a question real fast. We actually took a big caravan down to Katrina a few years back, and the Red Cross was very emphatic about their rules as far as accepting donations during that time.
Right.
And they were also they did not have the supplies to take care of Katrina whatsoever. And they basically stated that if it didn't meet they would rather see someone be a little thirsty or a little hungry rather than take some type of unapproved supplies. And I'm saying that because they wanted to protect against disease, which I understand their perspective. That's one observation. The second observation, which leads to my question, is it with today's 40? I'm 47, so let's go 47 down. With their value system not being as maybe what you had when you were in a bomb shelter in Brooklyn, where values were a lot more and people were part of the community. Do you think that these bomb shelters or these shelters in general would be safe for the general population to go to? Because this population is not ready for any type of severe problem at all. I mean, they are going to be very narcissistic and selfish. So I'm just asking that as a general question because that was my question.
I hear you.
I have it back, I can answer her, she can't, okay.
I have an answer too. Go ahead.
No,
You go.
you have an answer,
Okay.
go ahead.
She has money.
What I was thinking in answer to your question is when there's a problem outside, I mean a hurricane, a tornado, whatever, people have a tendency to stop being quite so nasty.
Okay.
It brings out, oddly enough, the best in all of us. It does not bring out the worst. You would think it would bring out the worst because you haven't lived through it. But, I mean, going down to the Cortina area, I have family who live down there, and they saw horrible things like vandalism, people running into stores, running out with television sets. It was just mayhem. All right. But as far as the general public, the families there, they were sort of tight. They wouldn't let go of their dog. Do you remember that one? All right, and that's another thing too with your bug out bag. If you have an animal, make certain that he or she has all of their papers in your bug out bag, because they need to know that that dog has been vaccinated and is licensed. They're not going to let you put that dog on a bus unless they know that your dog is well taken care of. And you have to pack food for the dog, because well, guess what, at the shelters there is no food for the animals. They don't think about that.
Cat.
Well, cat, dog, doesn't matter, parakeet. But the point is that no matter what you have and want to bring, you have to take care of them and make sure their papers are clear so that they don't get left behind. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And I know a friend of mine was rescuing animals in Katrina. A lot of animals just got thrown away almost, and so they were rounding them up and trying to find the owners, and they did find most of the owners because they had tags. That was the only reason they could find them. But those animals were quite shaken. Yes.
The general answer to this man's question is that subway tunnels are very good, very safe places for tornadoes and nuclear attack. The subway in Moscow was designed expressly to do that. The ones in Paris and France predate this era, but there are enough of them that they would be good shelters. The problem in Dallas is there's not nearly enough to accommodate the 10% of the population. That was never their design.
Let me just add one thing. Every building, every school building that has been built in Dallas was supposed to have a shelter built under it, and it's usually under the gymnasium. That's the reason those buildings cost so much, is because of that shelter. And it was, my children were marched down to the shelter not too long ago, and I said, well, did they talk about bug out bags? And he said, yes, and we knew what they were talking about. It was fun. So they are training children to go down to those shelters, and they are not like what I went through. It's bright, painted white, not scary at all. But they had to write a paper as to what they would put in their bug out bag.
Yeah,
So,
back in the 50s, we had something called civil defense, which was a
oh yeah,
diffuse,
I remember that.
where the public took, and we didn't rely upon federal bureaucrats. But many buildings, older buildings particularly, will have something kind of a yellow and black symbol on them. It says civil defense. That that usually means parts of the building are for shelters. And I don't think explicitly have a shelter underneath them, but any kind of concrete or concrete and steel building is a better place to get. I want to go back to something you said, though. You said you have a landline and you have a Wi-Fi charger thing, and you could go out in the woods and access your. Could you explain more about that? Did I understand you correctly?
I can't go out into the woods. All right, this isn't camping gear. This is where there is an electrical socket. That's what charges it. I'll bring it in next week and show it to you, because when they told me, I didn't know really how to explain it to myself, so maybe you can tell me, yes.
Oh, I usher at the Winspear Opera House, and that building is built to withstand a tornado.
Yeah.
And people, it's open, the garage, and people could go under there. There's several other buildings, you know, downtown, so those are things to.
One of the things I want to find out is where are these buildings? Where are these safe places for us to go? It's one thing to tell me all the time about ISIS and keep me in the know as far as what's going on in Europe and Asia and the rest of the world, but give me positive things. Give me information that will help me and make me feel more secure, not just sort of like, oh, go find your own shelter. I happen to find something, somebody owns a building here in town, and they said, well, I was welcome to come to their shelter. But don't mention it to anyone else.
On the subject of tunnels in the buildings downtown,
Yeah.
usually every year the Chamber of Commerce puts out some, slick magazines that they give out as handouts to people. If you're out to the Chamber of Commerce, we're coming to visit your city next month for 2 weeks. Would you please send us appropriate information? And one of the things you'll get is sort of like a junior D magazine that has a lot of things in it. But it'll have a map of the downtown with all the buildings, and it'll have one of the diagrams in there will show you the tunnels that interconnect. Probably at least 16 or 18 of the buildings. I've walked through most of it.
Well, I've been downtown to the tunnels down there where they have stores and restaurants. Is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
that's down around one main place, and
Yeah.
there is that, but almost all of those buildings from Ross Avenue south are connected by a tunnel system. There are a
I'd love
few
to
that
see
are
a
just
copy of
connected
that.
by a,
It's on the internet.
second story
It is?
causeway, but almost all of them are connected with tunnels. Now, and then we mentioned the train tunnel. It's just about 5 miles from downtown to Mockingbird Station.
Yeah.
That's a lot of underground tunnel. And when it gets down to where City Place is, where you can access it from the surface, it's 100 feet deep.
That's pretty safe.
That'll take
And
care of it. That's
A
great.
little,
they had
little
never
scary.
They had never drilled anything like that in Dallas before, but they brought in machines like they might use to put in a subway up in New York. And they went way down into the rock. And that train goes way down 100 feet. To get up into the building, you have to ride through several escalators and to get upstairs. But anyway, you're very, very, very safe, very far underground. And you don't really have to be that far underground.
Not for a tornado.
Not for tornadoes.
No, tornadoes are superficial. I mean,
But if you get down under that, you'd be pretty safe from a nuclear bomb going off as long as it wasn't shot into the ground where you were. But the Chamber of Commerce will have something that'll show a diagram of all those.
Do you have a
tunnels.
copy of it?
Forget it.
I wanted to.
I've had copies of it before. I don't have one
That
anymore.
mostly radioactive material. Yeah.
Well, hydrogen bombs are a whole different subject.
Yeah.
And I was quite astounded at how many people died without hydrogen bombs in World War I and World War II. Yes.
Wait, Tom and I, we were in Detroit for about a month last summer, and we went to Windsor, Canada, and they were telling me that the people from that area, that they do a lot of smuggling
Yes.
across from the Detroit River and up. Well, actually, they were bringing Cuban cigars, but they're also, I'm sure there's people who can, gain access to Canada. I don't know now,
Now, I think they've closed down everything.
Mhm.
They've been very, very judicious about, that's why they got, those men, I said they were customs officials. All right, they weren't, they were the army. They were the Canadian Army. And they have been conscripted
When was this,
into,
last year you were on
Yeah,
the train?
last
Yeah, we
August.
were last August from Windsor to Toronto. We didn't have anybody.
well, Windsor to Toronto is not New York to Montreal.
I got you.
That was crossing a state line, and that's what they were trying to stop, is people crossing state lines or national lines. And also, England has a policy that we may end up having implemented in this country. The government owns our passport. We do not own our passport. It's not our possession. And they can take it away from us at any time. And I didn't know that till somebody told me that I had to get that straight in my head, because in England and in Canada, they will take away your passport. So you cannot leave. You cannot travel. They did that while I was there, actually.
Now, I have a question for you about what happened on your trip. As soon as I wiped the lemon meringue pie off my finger. Okay, it sounded to me like the way you described it was that it was fairly standard passport control, except that it was done in a way that was very unfriendly and not done in the standard manner. Because, you know, if you fly into the United States, you know, you go through a passport control like that and that kind of thing, and they would do exactly what you're talking about, but those are people that are all trained to treat you properly and not to terrify you in the process of doing it.
Okay. What terrified me was this. When I walked into the train that I was sent to, or the car that I was sent to, I passed all these people sitting around and being talked to by the customs officials. When I came back, 7 of them were missing, and I didn't count, but somebody else did. They had been taken off the train. Just picked up and taken off, and their suitcases were gone. So you've got to understand that in Canada, it's getting they're getting very strict with their laws and their rights, and they're not American rights. So when you go to another country, you have to live by their rights, not by ours.
Yeah. And may I ask I don't want to ask another question.
Sure.
I mean, do you think that the situation is that the people in Canada have rightly determined that the United States is a much bigger target for ISIS and so on than Canada is, and so they are, when people come from the United States into Canada, they want to make sure that terrorists are not, they're trying to protect themselves from the stuff that's going on here that I believe we've brought on ourselves by our Middle Eastern policy.
Well, I was there when 2 guards were, there was the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Do you remember reading about that at all? They were both killed, shot down by ISIS. It was in protest for the treatment that the people in ISIS were being given in Canada. They didn't like it. And so they killed those 2 gentlemen, those 2 soldiers. And so what happened is, and it usually happens like this, the Canadians got mad, but not at America. They got mad at ISIS. All right, they don't want that kind of stuff going on in their country. And they wanted to make very sure that we didn't bring it from America. And they wanted to make very certain that they didn't export the people from their airport to any other country. So they were making these very, very big, broad decisions, and it was sort of reassuring in a way. I wish sometimes that we did a little more of that. But it was very amazing to see that kind of military rule. And I was shocked. He said, the Prime Minister said, because I was watching their television, he said, the fact that you have a passport is a privilege. And obviously not too many of you realize it. You don't have to have it, and we don't have to give it to you, and we can take it back anytime if you violate our rules. And they were serious. He was serious. And the police are serious. Yes?
Do you think that, wait, just a silly question.
Tom,
Are you okay, Tom?
yeah, Tom is an acrobat.
He's graceful.
I do want to go to Canada sometime, and now, you know.
Oh,
really
don't,
make sure-
no, please go,
No.
please go. I'm going back.
No, I do want to go. But do you think that we all should get a passport in case something should happen?
Yes.
That we should have one?
Yes, it is the best identification you can have. Your license can be fooled with, tampered with, they can
Yeah.
question it all over the place. But a passport is one thing that says you are an American citizen. You couldn't even go to Canada without one.
Well, you used to.
Well, we can't now.
Well, in case we have something happen here, we need.
It can't hurt. It's a little pricey. It costs about $100.
Where do we go? Where do you just look up?
You go down to, you go to the post office,
Any post
It's
office.
Any
Courthouse
post office.
downtown.
Oh,
Downtown,
Post
you go
office.
downtown.
Yeah, you can go to the post office.
Okay.
You have to have your photo ready for it,
Oh, okay.
And you have to have
Yeah,
a
you
certified copy of your birth certificate.
I had one.
yeah.
another ID thing.
You can get one of those
Certified copy of
photographs
your
done
birth
at
certificate.
Walgreens for a couple of dollars.
Oh, okay.
It's not a big deal. Do you have a birth certificate?
Yes.
Well, then that's the most important thing. That's the thing they really, really want to see.
Okay.
And your photograph. Yes.
Tom?
I have not been to Canada since what you talked about, but I can tell you Canada is probably a much safer, cleaner country than we are. But they have a problem we don't have, the same problem that Britain does. They are part of the British Commonwealth. And Commonwealth nations have an agreement whereby their citizens can travel to other Commonwealth nations. And one of those Commonwealth nations was Pakistan. Guess where ISIS is? Pakistan.
They're where?
Pakistan.
Oh, Pakistan, yes.
Did you ever read The Looming Tower by Lawrence Wright? It's along those lines. You might enjoy. I haven't read it either, but it's been recommended by a lot of people. I'll tell you this, I was in Hong Kong one time and took a side trip to China, and when we started going through, there were two little guys up front with automatic weapons, and they said line up, and they didn't mean line up in just a straight line, they meant line up in ascending numerical order. You know, we didn't have a problem doing that at all.
Yeah, I noticed that in China too. They have that big ring that takes your temperature and decides if you're diseased and anything's wrong with you, and then they take a photograph of your iris of your eye. I felt violated. I was just standing there and I knew what they were doing. I was being mugged. I was getting mug shot. And so they are very careful in other countries about letting us in. You know, we can do all sorts of crazy things. I'll tell you a funny story about that. Sometimes countries do funny things to hide what they're really doing. My son was in the Navy. My son-in-law was in the Navy, and he was stationed in Japan. And he told me this story, and I was in the Philippines at that time on the island of Cebu. And they had a big dock, and it was a transport place. And the Chinese and the Americans got together, and they rounded up all of the boats and craft in the China Sea, in and around the Korean area and all of that. And they brought them in to Cebu because bird flu was a very big problem. And they wanted to make certain nobody had brought bird flu into the Philippines or China. So I was trying, what in thunder does bird flu have to do with anything? Well, it didn't, but it gave them an opportunity to seize every one of the ships that came into that port, go through them and decide if they had contraband, and they did. They had missiles all over the place and were headed towards North Korea. They knew the guns were on the ships. I mean, they were aware of it. The only way they could get them there is to say bird flu. Can you imagine? It was strange, but countries will do very, very weird things if they don't want to tell you the truth. But they want to protect you, because we have a tendency to be very worried when we find out what they're doing. And we might start second guessing them.
We did a similar thing during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
A blockade is a declaration of war. And they use blockade to use a quarantine.
Right.
Quarantine, and that's not a declaration of war.
Yeah, anything goes when it comes to war, or when it comes to the safety of the community, anything does go. And it should, in a way, because you do want to be protected. You don't want to be out there. without some protection. And some of it's of our own doing, not having anything in a bag, not having all your papers together. That's setting yourself up for a panic. Because if somebody says the tornado's coming to your house, what are you going to do?
Look at Katrina.
Or look at Katrina. You don't want to be running through the house looking for your passport. You don't want to be running through the house looking for anything. And the seniors are the most important. If you have seniors in your family, you really should help them, make them really understand that it's good for them also to have all of their things in one place instead of scattered. Just as important as it
Along
is.
your idea of a go bag, or what'd you say?
Well, you
Go
know.
bag.
Hmm?
Go bag? What was your name?
Bug out bag.
Bug out
bag. I have a hard time remembering that it's called a bug out bag. I had a pillowcase. It was a lot simpler.
Well, someone once told me that when you travel, especially outside of the country, you ought to take at least one, or if you're outside of the country, maybe two Xerox copies of all your travel papers and put them in different places. That's the same thing that is true about your passport. A Xerox copy of your passport is not a legal document, but if you happen to have it lifted or it got lost or you got mugged, at least you got something to show them, and it might buy you some time, or they might say, oh, if you're trying to get back in without a passport, but you got a Xerox copy, they say, okay, we ain't gonna ship it, we're gonna quarantine you. But it's better being shipped back to you know where.
Yeah. One of the things, just tying with what you just said, when I was in Canada again, I thought I had lost my passport. I mean, I really did think I had lost it. And I hadn't. It stuck on the lining of my purse, got inside my purse. And I had an absolute panic because how am I going to get back into the United States without a passport? And somebody said, well, you have a Xerox copy, don't you? And I said, no, I don't. And I found the passport, and the first thing I did is got it Xeroxed. And I realized that if you get stuck in another country and you have a Xerox copy and only a Xerox copy of your passport, they will help you. They will get you home on a temporary of some sort. But if you come in with nothing,
Who are you? It's who are you?
who are you, and prove it, and you can't. So, I mean, and that's why everything should be Xerox. You're absolutely, remember I told you about that envelope? All right, I have everything in there, but I also have the Xerox copies.
I'm going to make a suggestion that, you know, when you get a passport, you also have the opportunity to get a wallet card for your passport.
Really? I didn't know.
Yeah, you do now.
Oh, good.
And I'm not clear just how far you can go with that. I know for certain you can get into Mexico and Canada with it, but it's kind of like a driver's license. It's just your passport card. I think it costs about, I don't know, maybe $10 more or something.
Could I get it now? I mean, I just got my passport within the past year.
You,
Re-upped it.
I would look online and check.
Yeah.
The other thing is, you know, a lot of people are storing their documents not on paper, but electronically, and you can easily make PDFs of your documents and put them on a little thumb drive or something.
I have a lot of thumb drives with.
Yeah, but if you're gonna do that, you might wanna stick it in an anti-static bag. You know, so that.
My thumb drive, put it in an amp.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It really does.
Those wallet cards for the passport,
Yeah.
those can be used any country that does not require a visa, because you don't have to, any country where they have to stamp in the passport, the stamp when you enter the country,
Yeah.
you can't use the wallet card. But if it's a
Ah.
country that doesn't require the stamp, then you can use the wallet card.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, I've always gone to countries that require a stamp.
But
I wouldn't
You're a
have-
real traveler, you're not a casual traveler.
No, I'm a very serious traveler.
2 or 3 or 4 years ago, there was an article that appeared in the New York Times. This is the post 9/11 situation, but if you're going to travel outside of this country and you have a laptop, do not take it with you. They have the authority, and they frequently exercise this right, is they will confiscate it and everything in it, and you may or may not get it back, ever. You gotta travel someplace, you gotta take some information, put it on a thumb drive. And there are always computers in hotels and little internet bars, but they are getting, the border people are getting real persnickety because someone in Washington is pulling their chain.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. And but a lot of those people were taken off of the train because they wouldn't give up their computers. I'm sure of that.
Oh,
Because of what?
They wouldn't give up their computers.
Or drugs.
Oh.
Or hard drives, or any, I mean, I don't know why they got into a fight or altercation with the guards, but I'm sure it was over computers.
Well, I mean, most of our computers have all kinds of stuff on them. And if you're a business person, you have probably trade secrets and confidential documents, et cetera, et
Well,
cetera.
you shouldn't get on no, then you shouldn't.
You should not take your laptop.
No.
But here's another thing you all may have forgotten. The late Senator Edward Moore Kennedy's name was on some kind of list that caused him trouble every time he had to get on a plane. It wasn't a private plane. And they never could figure, well, they never disclosed why, and even with all his clout, he could never get it taken off.
Well, if you've been to Cuba, you get pulled over in the past.
If you what?
Been to Cuba.
Been to Cuba?
Used to be that way, you get pulled over, they see you've been to Cuba.
Oh.
Oh, if you're going through and they see on your passport you've been to Cuba, because I have friends who, you get pulled over. They want to know why you were in Cuba.
Yeah.
They took cigars.
I'd get a new passport.
Well, I was in Cuba to learn how to bring socialism to the United States.
Did they let you back in?
Yuck, yuck.
In this administration, you probably got a free pass.
Any more questions?
I think we're out of it. I think you have to sit down now.
Oh, good, good. Thank you so much. Oh.
Okay, now it's your turn to talk. You get up to 5 minutes here and comment on what the speakers had to say. And who wants to be first? You get 5 minutes to speak, not 5 minutes to ask questions. You already had the question period. Just remember that.
Sorry about that.
No more questions. Speaker is through answering questions. Who wants to be first? Have we got a first? Okay, here comes one.
But it was kind of fun to have her pick up her cell phone and dial this number and someone answers and she says, Joe, what's going on?
Well, I have a lot more to share than I could share in 5 minutes on this subject matter. One of the things that a person who does not wish to have a gun might consider is a stun gun. That can work both ways, though, if it's ever taken away from you. Unfortunately, because I did not have concealed carry and because I was not armed, I passed up an opportunity to save 2 lives. We have a group here that operates in the Dallas area, Los Zetas, and cutting to the chase, one of their favorite things was to take people up on a high five, taser them, stun gun them, and throw them over. And then the paper reports it as suicides, which the police have to know these are not suicides, but the public is treated to suicides. A stun gun is actually one of those unrecognized weapons, and it's a good reminder, always be conscious of your personal space. If someone begins entering your space, you need to let them know, back off, do not allow it, become very alert. I've had 3 mugging attempts that I was able to stop basically by attitude, because I wasn't armed then either. But part of it is to have the mugger have an idea that yes, you're completely aware of what's going on. A lot of times, like a mugger will come up because I'm sometimes the last person out of a theater or last person out of some facility somewhere. I'm packing up. This can happen. Usually muggers come in twos. It's usually a team. And you'll have someone approach you while the other one may circle around behind or just kind of stay in the background a bit. It will be some plausible something. The guy comes up, he says, "Did you lose your keys?" Well, I've already got my car door open. I mean, no, I didn't lose my keys. But the point of it is he's advancing, he's coming in. And I have to let him know that, no, you need to back off. And this has worked most times. One time I just really got lucky. I had a cop I had befriended at a establishment, and this guy did not stop. He was moving right in, and the cop walked out the door just when the guy happened to glance back towards the door before he made contact with me. And the guy was big.
Gary?
So that was really one of those guardian angel type things, I'd say. But now, as far as emergencies and so forth, interesting thing happened. I spoke last week about the May 3rd, 99 tornado, F5 tornado in Oklahoma. What I didn't mention is more than 500 people were injured, 41 people were killed. The interesting thing about it is the Oklahoma people, of the Metroplex anyway, went into action right away. They did not wait for orders from headquarters. They were carrying people in the backs of pickup trucks. They were transporting people in station wagons. They got 500 people to area hospitals before any emergency command and control was really even set up. And they did have a command center picked out. It was in one of the worst areas there in Midwest City. Literally, people who encountered the tornado, you had these little wads of goo that just got splattered everywhere. I mean, there was no recognizable piece of a human. Really, really violent tornado. But the people everybody, all the serious cases were all taken care of by just citizens before, and then the sheriff's department moved in and asserted their power, sheriff's department and the local Red Cross, and they asserted their power, and they told all the volunteers to get out. They were rude. It was a really incredible thing to encounter. They actually arrested some people who'd been helping. And to encounter that going on, you realize that to some people, some agencies, command and control is very important. And you can run into that in an emergency situation. And then, of course, here I'm almost out of time, and
1 minute.
1 minute. No time to talk about much.
I'll cede my
Albuquerque,
5 minutes to you.
I don't know if it works that way. I don't think we have Robert's Rules of Order here exactly, but anyway, I videotaped a lecture given by a Colonel John R. Brinkerhoff at the Strategic Indirect Warfare Conference in February of 2004, conducted in Albuquerque. And that, I'm sorry, nutcase, with a lot of gravitas, who wrote plans and policy for FEMA, plans and policy now for Homeland Security. His definition of a catastrophic emergency is a prolonged power outage or even an economic downturn. People, beware. His solution is use more than 400,000 troops, this is his recommendation, to quarantine a metro area and force relocate everyone and deal with any who resist very sternly. This is American policy right now. A lot of that was you saw at Katrina. Some of the things that are totally unexplainable why they did what they did. This was a policy set by individuals like Brinkerhoff. Thanks.
Okay, who's next? Gotta be next. I can't believe this.
I'm happy to see my 5
I think
minutes.
everybody's talked out.
Anyway, just have you next. Jim, you gonna be up here? No?
All right, I'll take a day.
Come on up here.
You're not gonna be seated. I was not gonna say anything.
Yeah,
Keep
well,
my mouth shut for once. Provoke some things.
Okay, I'm gonna give you 6 minutes.
yeah, this is your remarks period,
No, I'm
not
gonna do,
questions.
I'm gonna do this. Yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah,
do
no
this
more
in 5
questions. Yeah, no more questions.
Well, we're getting negative progress around here. I'm going to ask questions and cede my time. On the surface, it sounds like being organized and having a national, what do you call it, FEMA, Federal Emergency Management, that each that is in contact with each state and each state's civil defense and National Guard. Doesn't that sound real organized and professional to most of you? You're not saying yes or no. Yes? How many say yes?
Should be.
Yeah, I mean, and no opinion. Well, along the lines of what this previous gentleman said about the colonel and the Oklahoma tornado, what escapes national attention but was all over the local papers is they had hundreds of volunteers in their fishing boats and battues and cabin cruisers lined up down the bayous and the rivers to come into New Orleans to evacuate people they didn't know, just like the British did at Dunkirk. You know what happened? They were told, no, you cannot do that. Get the hell out. And the reason I bring this up is not only because of what you said, but you'll recall 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had a gentleman with the Dallas County Schools, Larry Duncan.
Yeah.
He mentioned something that I'd never heard before. He said in connection with Katrina, they had 500 buses and 750 drivers lined up to get people out. You know what they told him? No.
Stay home.
Stay home.
They didn't even use their own school buses.
You're damn right. Pardon. There's another thing that's not known well outside of the state, and that is the state of Louisiana had several ferry boats up at a little town called Luling, Luling. You can see it on the map about 20 miles north of New Orleans. They could have come down and gotten those people out on their own, but they didn't. And this is what happens when you have a mayor and a governor that can't work together. And some of it is the feds coming in and sticking their nose in. So big government really is not there to help you. That's the essence of what most of what I have to say. And like this gentleman, our photographer, our videographer says, people, at least in this part of the country, and I'm sure we're no different than any other Americans, volunteers step up to handle these situations. Tell the feds to take a hike. That's in 5 minutes.
Here, last year you get.
Do I get to go
Oh, I
twice?
get the last word.
I
love that.
Tom, do I get to go twice?
Sure.
Unless somebody else wants to go ahead of you.
Some of you have heard me at this mic before talking about how I was a civil defense brat. My father was a regional manager in civil defense, and I spent a lot of weekends in the shelters going through role playing and so forth. Red Cross, other agencies have wonderful programs for training people, but America today is not prepared like we were in the 60s. There is no provision for the shelter of vast amounts of people like we had in the 60s. I think for the most part, a lot of the population is just being written off for whatever reason or policy, I don't know. I don't know how much I want to tell on this, but I was visiting with a friend over in Fort Worth, and she was rather concerned about barbed wire, concertina, and guard gates showing up near her Defense Department contractor husband's work. So we went out and we looked at it, looked at the railroad lines going in, looked at the roadway layout. And I said, well, it's really obvious what's going on here is all they have to do is close off one road and they can make this entire shopping area here, which is restaurants. I mean, it's larger than any mall. They can make that exclusive to the defense contractors and make it card key access only or retinal scan access only for the contractors and their families. I said, well, I don't see that you have anything to worry about. The rest of us might have something to worry about. If we've got empty shelves, those shelves are going to be full.
Okay, who's next? You want to be next? No?
You could wrap it up.
Come on up here. You got 5 minutes.
I'll leave real quick.
Oh, I got 5 minutes. if you
Sure,
want.
thanks. To kind of add to a couple of comments about how Homeland Security has been built up, it was about 2008, about 2007, 2008. My office was in the same building as the Homeland Security training facility for their higher end officers. And they were running through there close to about 50 people every 3 weeks. And we did the numbers. They were making officer types. And one gentleman made a comment of 400,000 people. We looked at the numbers, is that if they were running about 100 to 150 people through there, it was astronomical the number that they would be in control of after that fact, as far as being almost, if you want to call it a Homeland Security police department, if you per se. So just an interesting number that we saw them going in and out every day. So thanks.
Okay, who's next? Debbie next. We're running out of people who've been talking up here. I can't believe this.
I'll tell you what,
Come on up here.
I will,
I'll go back to the theme of deja vu all over again, and instead of talking about the the bug out bag and that kind of thing, I'll just tell you some of the experiences that I've had relating to World War II and terrorism and so on. When I was in the 3rd grade in Baltimore, my friend Peter's mother asked my mother if I could come over for dinner one night. So I go over to their house, and they had this store, and they lived above the store in Baltimore. And we sit down at the dinner table, and I can remember, the stairs came up, and there was a railing to protect you from falling down the stairs, and then the dining table was right next to that railing. And we're sitting there, Peter and I across from each other, his parents at each end, and I looked at his parents, and I noticed something, and that was, I noticed they both had stenciled numbers on their forearms. And so I asked them about that. And that was the first time I'd ever heard about the Holocaust. And they did not tell me this part of it at the time. They told me, I don't remember exactly what they said, but it was age-appropriate stuff. But I found out later that Peter's mother and Peter's father both had families, spouses, children, the whole works, all of whom had been killed in concentration camps. And Peter's mother was the sole survivor in her family. and Peter's father was the sole survivor in his family, and they had emigrated to the United States and met and married and had Peter. So, you know, that really hit home, you know. Now, I remember during the Cuban Missile Crisis, one day, these cars just started lining up outside my school. And all of a sudden, the teachers are piling us into the cars, and the cars are driving us way out into the country. And this was a civil defense response to a potential nuclear attack, was to get you away from the city center where you would have a better chance of survival in an event of a nuclear attack. Now, I used to travel a lot on business, and one time I was coming home, and I was at Heathrow to go through customs to fly back to Dallas, and I missed my flight because the customs just got really, and they were just really looking at people and slowing it down. This was in the 1990s. And it turned out that the reason, I didn't find out until later, was that apparently some Middle Eastern gentleman had blown himself up in his tourist hotel in London that day making bombs. And the thing about it is, apparently all the tourists, there's nobody in the hotel. He got blown up, but no one else got hurt, and the building came down. But nevertheless, you know, you can imagine that would put people on alert in airports and things. This was like 1995. So now, as far as a bug out bag, I do not have a bug out bag, but I'll tell you this, I've got enough food in my house just by virtue of the fact that I hoard food that I could live for 6 weeks just on the food that's there.
Well, you gotta have a place to live.
Huh?
You gotta have a place that's shelter for you in case there's an...
No, I understand, but a lot of these emergencies, though, are based on, not on you losing your place to live, but the power goes out for an extended period of time, the water gets contaminated, there's a whole raft of things that can happen. And by the way, I lived in a high-rise on Turtle Creek for 27 years, and I guess if I needed a shelter, what I'd do is run over to my friends Margaret and Grover, or to Richard and Celine's, and hang out in their basement. They've got a 3-story deep underground parking garage under that building. So anyway, I just thought you might find those little tidbits interesting.
Jeffrey, can you open up all your cans? You don't need to cook it? You said you got enough for 6 weeks.
Yeah, I'm not talking about stuff that's in the refrigerator.
No, I meant the canned goods you're able to just...
Yeah.
Do you have a manual or is it electric?
Oh, I don't have an electric can opener.
Good.
But
That would be a problem.
yeah.
That's good.
Okay, who's next? You gotta be next. Come on up here. Oh, I saw your hand go up.
I'm probably not in step with everybody seeing it, but I'll let it.
Made the mistake of letting your hand go up.
I probably should go to sleep. I'm sorry that I missed most of the presentation, but I looked at it and tried to come up with what this subject was about, and listened at questions and rebuttals. I think I got a feel. I think we have some concerns there. Since I've spent 29 years in the federal government, and the agency that I worked with wasn't perfect, but we did try to do what the law and the regulations said do, and we tried to do that best of our ability. And I guess from that I said, I know that ever since the Patriot Act was passed in 2001, a large number of people have been concerned about losing, what we call our security, because the federal government is getting all kinds of information. But I learned about a year ago it wasn't the federal government that was getting information on me, but someone on the internet had everything I'd ever done, and you have to pay for it. And I had a former girlfriend whose husband died. She decided she would look me up, and she went on the internet and she told me about everything that I had done since I'd been a man, since I graduated from college in 1960. So that information is probably, they have that on everybody. And that's not the government. But I guess my concern, we do have to be cautious. We need to be more informed of what's going on and prepare as best we can. But I tend to believe, we can do so much as individuals. It's hard to coordinate everybody trying to do something. And we need a government to do those kinds of things for us, but we need to, we need to have a government that we trust. So I'm not going to try to defend the government because the government does some things that I don't think is right and what they should do. But the government does, like Tom says, we have the best people in government that money can buy. And if you don't have money, you don't buy very much of it. And the other people who do have money, they determine what the policies are going to be. And unless that's a whole human outcry of a large segment of society, nothing is going to change. And that's what that's what I think we need to try to do together, is try to get beyond these issues, wedge issues, and come to some conclusion what we think our government ought to do and organize and insist that the government do that and not be misled by people with money getting what they want, because that's what they do. So I have to be fairly optimistic. I can't get too pessimistic involved. I know some of these things. I've been concerned about the thing that happened in Baltimore, Maryland, and in Charleston, South Carolina, and throughout the country. I've been very concerned about that. And I haven't been able to come up with anything to deal with it. It keeps on happening in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and all these kinds of things that are happening, and it seems like nothing is done about it. The 6 officers in Baltimore, Maryland, probably going to get some time out of this, and it probably was one person or 2 people who did what was done was wrong, but because they didn't report it, they are guilty too. And in Charleston, it was an African American officer came in. He didn't tell the truth either, so they're getting ready to indict him for withholding information that made it difficult for them to make a decision. So I think we need to be very cautious. Nobody in the world, except perhaps England, care much about the United States. And if we read our history in foreign policy and military policy, you probably would understand. Now, I've heard people here talk about Iran and all that kind of stuff, but Iran, the CIA created a revolution and put the Shah in control. And then we, let our culture filter over into their culture, which was very, very much opposed by the religious leader of Iran. So in many respects, maybe they have a reason to not trust us. And I think we need to understand that and try to begin steps to correct some of the mistakes we've made in the past, so that we can move forward and maybe people will have respect for us. We spend a lot of money in foreign policy. It doesn't buy lots for us. And now that everybody knows we're a debtor nation rather than a loaner nation, nobody really fears the United States. The military stuff that we have is very powerful. We don't know how destructive it will be. But we can't use it because we may kill more of us than them. So those are some problems we got to wrestle with and try to get an answer. But we do have to be vigilant and understand and do what we can so that we can move. The things about passports is a good idea. You need to have copies of it. We have one, but I think we have expired. We haven't traveled since 2007, my wife has been sick. But we have to be vigilant, but let's not become too pessimistic, because we may do the wrong thing. Thank you.
One more.
Well, no comment about our excellent presentation tonight, but I was just sitting there reading back over the meeting notices for the upcoming weeks, and I just wanted to come back and highlight to you next week when Jim Love is going to speak to us. And those of you who are regulars know Jim Love always puts together an excellent presentation, and he covers a lot of territory. He'll go out and study something, research it, and do a good, easy to understand presentation. When I first saw the meeting notice and I read the title, I think it really sort of got me on the wrong channel, you know, politics, theory and practice in Appalachia. And, you know, Jim's purpose next week is not really going to be to make Appalachia the center of our current attention and needs that we have in the country, but to use it as a model, as an example of some of the things that have worked and have not worked in all of the federal government generated benefit packages that, and to some extent, go all the way back into the 30s when FDR became president. But in our current time, they basically go back to the Kennedy-Johnson administration when we first started putting things in like Medicare, for example. We have spent, if my memory serves me correctly, approximately $7 trillion since the 60s on all those programs. The last time I looked, there was something like 56 benefit packages, some of which overlap, some are independent and apart from each other. So we have put a lot of things in to help people with the problems they're having in their personal life, economically. It doesn't seem to have fixed a lot of the problems. It's helped people to be able to eat and to feed their children and to get them and keep them in school. But there are a lot of things that has not done. And I think Jim will talk about both the accomplishments of the plans, and he's a pretty candid speaker. He'll tell us about some of the things that have not worked. We might get some ideas about what we might want to be doing to fix some of it and make it work better. Because to spend that much to be able to spend, let me start again, to spend that much money and find that the percentage of the American population which is still living below what we designate as the poverty line. That's not to say people haven't climbed out of poverty. They have, and they do, and they will, and they'll continue to do so. But overall, we do not have fewer percentage of the total population who are living down below what we designate as minimum living standards. And that's a big issue. And politicians can get up, you know, we got election coming up here in a year and a half. We're going to hear them ranting and raving about that a lot here over the next year and a half. It's helpful when we can talk about it in this kind of setting and get some facts and figures and kind of understand what is really going on out there. So then when we listen to a politician speak up at the podium, we stand a better chance of understanding what they're really talking about and dismissing a lot of what they say. But I think that's going to be a good one. And to hear John Beasley come and talk about John Maynard Keynes from his own native country the following week should also be very good on the subject of economics. So put those on your calendars and invite some of your friends who are not regulars to come. I think they'll enjoy those.
At the Strategic Indirect Warfare Conference in 2004, Colonel Brinkerhoff went to question and answer. A Special Forces officer spoke up and asked the question. He said, "Sir, Special Forces goes into third world countries all over the world, and in 8 months we have them prepared to handle any emergency themselves. Why couldn't we do that here in the United States? True, it might take 12 months because Americans watch too much TV, but with as little as 2,000 Special Forces troops deployed across the country, we could have this whole taken care of in 1 year's time." Brinkerhoff replied, "Sorry, we're not going to do that." I can't give you everything, there's not enough time. Almost the very next talk was by Shalom Asiskovich of Intel Israel, speaking about security in Israel, talking about the training, how every child going to school, every child has their lunch pail and then they have their NBC suit, and every corporate office has their safe room. They have triple tier training so that if someone has to go man a fighter jet somewhere, they've got someone trained to take his position and someone trained behind that to take the position, so that every company can continue to put out their product whether they are in a wartime stance or not. That is civil defense. We don't have civil defense here.
Amen.
No.
I think we're out of people. Looks like we're out of people. I'm the last one standing.
Squeezed all the blood out of the turnip.
Yeah, we squeeze all the blood out of the turnip. We got time. We're all right. Anyway, I want to, first of all, I want to thank our speaker. I think she did a terrific job. I don't have much to say to add to this. I was in the Navy during Cuban blockade, and I remember you're talking about how people react to things. When the Cuban Missile Crisis came up, we were after the Russian trawlers because they had a lot of radar gear that they weren't supposed to have on them, and the radar gear was to discover us. And the reason was that they were taking bathythermograph drops. They were running bathythermograph drops down into the water so they could make sonar charts. They could run submarines and we'd never know it. That was the reason. And so our job was to burn up their radar, which we did. And that all happened about the time of the Cuban crisis. And the reason I bring it up is that nations, people react to what goes on around them. Just as what happened to you in New York. And it's something that you have to deal with. Anyway, that's everything I had to add. You can now get to respond to all the remarks that were here tonight, and you get the last word. So come on up here.
Okay. Do any of you remember what happened to the Japanese families here in America?
Yes.
During the Second World War? They were put in concentration camps. They were scooped and put in for their own protection. Okay?
Right.
The government can do a lot of really, really strange things, and I fear sometimes that we're naive in believing that they wouldn't do the really awful things, like put us in concentration camps because we're out of control, or with the wrong people at the wrong place. And that was FDR, and he was not known for being a nasty person. So, there's a point where you have to stop pushing, because the overreaction can be disastrous. And I worry because I have this horrible feeling that the overreaction is possible. And I don't want to see that at all. The overreaction might be that the police just quit. just pack up their bags and say, we've had enough of this nonsense. I'm getting the heck out of Dodge, find another job. I'm going into security work. And let every man for himself, with no law whatsoever. That is a possibility. And I have a sneaking suspicion the police are sitting around thinking of it. And we do have to be careful. Let's not push everybody around. We have to work together, not on opposing ends. We're not a football team, you know? That's what I'm trying to basically say. Now, if you're complaining about the government for a minute, you might.
Some people do.
I know. Well, there's an expression, put up or shut up. And the put up and shut up thing is, if you really want to do something for your fellow human, go to the Red Cross, sign up, get trained as a volunteer. Because the reason those people got turned away in Katrina was they had no paperwork that they'd ever been trained. And they couldn't have people who were trained working with people who weren't trained. They wanted nurses and doctors and trained people. They didn't want amateurs who don't know what they're doing, especially with needles and what have you, and weapons and, I mean, not weapons, things that were done by weapons, shots, gunshot wounds and so forth. They didn't want volunteers handling that. They really didn't, and they were a pain in the neck. And I've heard from people down in New Orleans that the volunteers were just out having some fun. They're drinking drinks, they're gonna do some work. They wanted the real Red Cross people. And so what I decided when I was putting this all together is, put up or shut up, Nancy. Join the Red Cross, get certified. Be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. Don't sit by and watch. If something happens, at least be qualified to do something. And I used to be an ocean-going lifeguard, and there's no water around here. I don't think of what I know, but I know some medical treatments that can be done, CPR in particular. But I'd like to get re-upped. It's a military term, but I'd like to get recertified with Red Cross, because I really think that's something I can do. I have done in the past, and I think all of you can do if you wanted to, because if there's a shelter, you can help. You can be a part of the solution. And I think thinking in terms of positive solutions is much better than worrying too much about the negative people out there. I mean, FEMA is lousy, but there were a couple of things in place during FDR's time that were even worse. And I won't go through those, but the Japanese were one of them. So, yeah, we both have sides, all right, of an argument. All I ask is, is just do what you can do, as much as you can do, and then complain. All right. And thank you very much for having me. I think you've got a new member.
Okay, we have to be out here by 9, just so you know. And we've generally retired on the Starbucks in the corner. You're welcome.
Oh, yes.
And we give our speaker whatever they want when they're, so that's it for tonight. What can I say? Thank you.
A small ball.